Today I want to talk to you a little bit about what our language or what our talk does to us, okay? The Bible is very clear. It says that the mouth and our words that we speak out of our mouth is like a rudder. It directs the boat in which direction the boat will go. And as teenagers sometimes, there's a couple things that always bothers us, especially when we're in residential. And I'm going to kind of deal with that just a little bit this morning. The first thing is that we get upset when we feel that no one cares about what we're saying, don't we? We get upset when we get a feeling that no one understands what we're going through. We get upset when we try to talk about something or we try to get attention to something and we're kind of pushed off to the side and say, "Oh, we'll deal with it later." It's like we get upset when we feel that no one values us. All right? Another thing that gets us in a disruptive mode or in a place of where we can get upset is the fact that when we become afraid of something. Now, I know that all of you have been through different things in life, and a lot of us don't want to admit when we're afraid. And that's a human nature, that we don't want to tell anybody when we're afraid. But there's times that anxiety will hit us when we become fearful on something. And that fear can be real or it can be imagined. If we're not careful, what we speak out of our mouth will create fear to come on us and begin to fear things. If I speak about something bad happening to my family, if I'm not careful, fear will grip me off of the words that I'm saying. And then I'll start thinking about it more and more and more. And the anxiety that hits me, sometimes I can't control. And so I'm very careful in what I say and how I say it. I've come to the conclusion when I looked in the mirror that I know who I am and I'm going to value myself because I know what I can accomplish. Now, the reason why I know there's certain things that I can accomplish in life is because I do this thing on a regular basis. It's called stretching. Now, I'm not talking about physical stretching. I'm talking about stretching who I am. I'm talking about putting myself in a position of where I will fail. I will put myself into positions at time that I know that I cannot win so that I can learn. It's called stretching. And as a leader, I've got to always come to the proportion that I am a flawed person. I'm flawed. I want you to think about that for a minute. Pastor Bob sitting in front of you, I'm flawed. You know what the word flawed means? I'll tell you what it means. It means blemished, damaged, or imperfect in some way. When you're flawed, human nature, we're automatically flawed. And I understand that I'm a flawed person, that I'm damaged in some areas, that I'm blemished in some areas, that I'm imperfect. I'm not a perfect person. And the second thing that I've come to the conclusion with Bob Denen so that I can understand my value, who I am. And listen, let me tell you something. I want you to really understand this. A lot of our issues that we have has to do with the fact that we don't know how to value ourselves. We cheapen ourselves by making. Now now I'm going to talk to the guys just for a minute. We'll put a persona or we'll put an act out there that nothing affects us and that we're tough. But deep down inside, we're still looking for someone to accept us. That's human nature. That's the flaw of who we are. Is I want someone to respect me. I want someone to think that I'm worth something. So the guys do it one way, girls do it another way. Girls do it in a different way, and I'm not a girl, so I don't know all the ways that you do it, but I know a lot of times you'll go inward and you'll try to do your hair a little different, or you're worried about the way you're dressed, and all those things. There's nothing wrong with what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that if we're not careful, we will try to get our identity and our value from people that are never going to give it to us. So what I do throughout my life is I'll do different things throughout my life that I've looked back on. I'm working on one right now that will stretch me, that will take me what I call out of my comfort zone, and it will cause me to look at myself and not to get my value from other people, but get my value from inside or my value from what I believe and I believe that God values me. I believe that God has made me, even though I'm flawed and imperfect, but He brought two things in my life that I look at every day. Forgiveness for my screw-ups and grace when He gives me favor that I have never earned. Here's what residential does. Let me tell you what we do here. We're trying to stretch you. We're trying to get you out of your bubble that you're in. Bad things have happened to all of us. We've made bad decisions, every one of us in this room. And in some way, we'll continue to make bad decisions because we're flawed, because we're imperfect, or we're blemished, or we're damaged in some way. But I'm here to tell you today that as you walk through the process of seeing who you really are, don't look at the person that lives in your pod of who you get your identity from. You need to identify who you are today. There's some people that sit here today that don't believe the way I believe. I still respect them. There's some people here that sits in this room today that a lot of times they don't like me. I don't get my identity from people. I get my identity from the promises that I've known that's been inside of me. And when I begin to get stuck in my world, then I stretch out and I put myself in positions so that I can be stretched. And by doing that, I set myself up to fail. I don't like to fail. Does anybody like to fail? Has anybody failed in the last week or two? I'll put them all up, okay? I fail continuously. About 3.5 years ago, I noticed that I was kind of getting stuck in a rut, and so I needed to push out a little bit. And I like to fish, and I've always had fished in like when we went on vacation. And so I told my wife, I said, I'm going to go and I'm going to start fishing crappie tournaments throughout the United States. And I didn't know anything about fishing crappie tournaments, national tournaments across the United States. All I know is that if I go out and throw a hook out in the water, that maybe I could get, a fish that would catch. But I never went and targeted a certain species of fish and was able to catch it on a regular basis. So I wanted to go out and I wanted to stretch myself. So I began to study and look at YouTube and all the stuff that what all the pros did and everything like that. And I went to my first tournament and took this picture in front of this big, a big trailer that they had there. And I felt so special because I was there. And I ended up dead last. I ended up 60th place out of 60 anglers. I felt that big. In fact, my first tournament I went to, when I showed up to the scale, I was the only person that didn't have a fish. I felt about that big. And I realized, did I feel good about it? Nope. I realized that I was the number one failure of that tournament. Okay? And so I went to the next one, and I went to the next one, and my first year, I think the highest I finished was, my goal became finish in the top 20. Well, my goal at first was, the second tournament was, just catch some fish. I don't care what size they are, just catch some fish. And so I slowly began to move up, and I got into the top 25, and then I was in the top 20. And then all of a sudden, a company came up to me, and it's a company that sits right here. It's called Genco Fishing. And they said, we like the way you handle yourself. We would like for you to use our product. I was on cloud 9. I called my family and said, you can't believe what just happened. Somebody just, they just approached me about sponsoring me, is what they ended up doing. But the whole time they had been watching me in the midst of my failures. And they were watching how I would handle myself. And I'd go up to 2 or 3 different people that was there, and I would say, well, what did you do today? And they're like, well, we spider rigged. And I'm like, what's spider rig? Well, we single pole jig over brush. I'm like, what are you talking about? And well, we use double minnow rigs. And I'm like, it's like, what? But the reason why I went into it is because I knew that I didn't know anything about it. And it wasn't about Bob winning, it was about Bob stretching. It wasn't about Bob becoming this great fisherman. It was about putting myself in a position that would make me learn. The hardest thing about learning is when we learn when we make a mistake. It's the hardest lessons to learn. And we ignore those lessons because we don't want anybody to know that we failed. So we don't want to learn the lesson off of the failure. We want to learn the lesson off of the success. Let me tell you something. You will never learn more off of success than you will learn more off of failure. But most people are afraid to fail because it affects our value. It affects what we think people think of us. Now, as I walked the line and I saw these big fish that they were bringing in, and everybody was going around the ones that would win and everything like that, I was like, man, one day. And I went up to the guy that was in charge of the tournament, and I finished, I think I was like second or third from the bottom. And I said, one day I'm going to be up on the stage, and you're going to hand me a check, and you're going to hand me a plaque. And he looked at me, big old smile on his face. He goes, you know what? I don't doubt it for 1 minute. So I went to this one tournament. It was in Kentucky. This was 2 years ago. And the lake is right on the middle of the Central Time and Eastern Time Zone. And we had I was ready to fish. I had good fish that I had found. I knew the way to find them. I knew how I could fish. It was called long lining. And I learned these different ways of how to fish. And so I went out and somehow on my phone will change automatically to the different time zones. And so there was a thunderstorm, and so I got delayed. I was sitting in the boat underneath the awning and was waiting for this thunderstorm to be done. And when I looked at my clock, it said I had 10 minutes before I could start fishing. So I took my boat, and I rushed out to my spot. I threw my lines in. It was like 6:35. And at 6:30, you can fish. So I throw all my lines out, and the rule is this. You cannot start fishing before 6:30. You cannot put a line in the water before 6:30. And so I began to fish, and I looked down, and all of a sudden I'm seeing boats racing by, going to different spots, and I'm like, everybody should be fishing. Why are they moving for right now? And I looked down at my clock, and as soon as I looked down at my clock, it went from 6:35 to 5:35. And I was right on the line of Central Time and Eastern Time, and here I had started 1 hour early. There was nobody in the boat. There was nobody around me. And the little thought in my mind was, pull those back in there. Don't tell anybody that you started early. You didn't hurt anything. You didn't catch any fish. It's okay. You'll be fine. Now keep in mind, if you win, they do a lie detector test on you, because there's some money that you can win, and there's people that's within the system that will find a way to cheat. So if you win, you get this lie detector test. If you fail the lie detector test, you're banned for life, and your name is smeared. And I began to sit there and debate. It was an accident. I won't tell anybody. Nobody's with me. Nobody saw me. It's an accident. Or, what's the right thing to do? So I fished the whole day. Had the best day of fishing ever. I had 9 pounds of fish when I came in, which would have put me in the lead on day 1. We had day 2 yet to do. And as I was approaching, I had this voice that was talking to me, don't tell them you started early. It's not that big of a deal. It's not that big of a deal. You didn't do it on purpose. You didn't cheat. You're not taking advantage of anything. And everything inside of me saying, are you going to let a fish determine your character? Are you going to let a fish determine what people think about you from now on if they catch you? And so I went up, I set my fish to the side, and went up to the guy who was weighing in. He goes, how'd you do today? I said, I did great. I got about 9 pounds. He goes, well, let's get him up here and get weighed. I said, nah. I said, I started at 5:35 because my phone changed over from Central Time to Eastern Time, or Eastern Time to Central Time. And he looked at me and he goes, oh, if you've got 9 pounds, you're about 2 pounds ahead of everybody right now. And he says, I have to disqualify you. I said, I understand. So he disqualified me for that day. He said, now you can still fish day 2. And he said, you can still fish day 2 and do what you need to do. And he said, we'll weigh your fish on day 2. And I said, okay. So I did that. So that evening, I ran into him at dinner, and he came up to me and I said, I hope you don't feel bad about me. He said, feel bad about you? He said, do you know how many people would have come and not told me that? He said, I have more respect for you now than I've ever had respect for you, Bob. He said, by the way, he said, there's several companies that's been asking for anglers that will be good character for them. He said, I've already contacted all of them. There'll be a few more companies that will contact you. As you can see, okay, there's a few more companies now that sponsor me. And it was because of the mistake that I made, but it was how I handled the mistake. Now, the next day I went in, I weighed 9 fish. If I would have weighed my first fish, I would have been at 18 pounds. I would have been everybody by 4 pounds. But I ended up finishing about 60th that day because I only had 1 day of fish. It was a miserable failure. If you look at the list of the anglers that are there, miserable failure. But on that day, because I decided that I was going to be a certain person, that I was going to not listen to the voices of everything that's saying this, don't say that, say this, don't say that, I decided to do what was right, even if it cost me. Now let me talk a little bit personally to you. We have all failed at that. Doing what's wrong when we know we should be doing what's right. Can I be honest with us? Would you all agree with me? That a lot of times when we're doing wrong, we know we're doing wrong. Because we have that voice that's inside of us saying, you shouldn't do this. But because of our value system of how we think about ourselves sometimes, we push that off to the side. See, my value was, it wasn't about winning to me, and I love to win. And it wasn't about losing. I hate to lose. It was about who I was. When nobody's watching and the decisions that you make is the kind of person that you will be. Now, let me start over again. Are you ready? I am a flawed human being. I am flawed. I'm imperfect. I'm damaged. I have blemishes in my life. But that I don't concentrate on because I decide to keep moving forward with what I'm saying. And so when I would make the statement to him, one day I'm going to be up on that stage. The first year, I didn't make it to the stage. Second year, made it to the stage one time, was in third place. So far this year, I decided to stretch myself. We normally don't do the tournaments. I won't do the tournaments in Florida. But this year I decided to do 3 tournaments in Florida. First tournament I did was December 4th. Now, last year, I finished 7th being ranked nationally as an angler. Pretty good. Felt pretty good about it. That's the way to go. I mean, it's better than finishing 60th. And I'm learning how to do what I need to do, but it's through all the failures that I've had. So I finished 7th as Angler of the Year, finished in 7th place out of 700. Not bad. Felt pretty successful with that. So this year I was like, well, I'm going to stretch myself because the Florida, and I'm not trying to bore you, I'm trying to bring us to a point. Florida tournaments are difficult. The way to catch fish in Florida, you don't stand a chance because all the Florida people fish it every day, and there's a certain way to fish it. But I decided to go on December 4th, and here's what I did. I set up, I found good fish in practice. I had a winning bag in practice, and I said, I'm going back to that spot. And when I went back to that spot 2 days later to fish the tournament, somebody had already fished it and cleaned all the fish out. I finished 16th out of 18th on the first Florida. Didn't feel real good about it, failed a lot. And I'm like, and then I started to, what can I do different? How can I do it differently? This does not rank. I was 7th last year. This is not the way I want to start this year out. So I went to the second tournament, which was a couple weeks ago in Florida. And I went up, I'm feeling good about myself, and I'm in second place. Second place, okay? And a team comes up, and they have 0.2 of a pound more than me, puts me in third place. I'm like, third place, I'm good. They pay money in third place. I get a plaque in third place. I get some acknowledgement. I'll feel good about finishing in third place considering I finished dead last the last tournament. And 2 minutes ago, before the line closed down, here comes these 2 old guys that live in Florida, and they're grumbling. We had a terrible day, terrible day. We didn't do anything. And with 2 minutes left to go, if they would have been 2 minutes later, they wouldn't have. And when they weighed in, they beat me by 0.14. You want to know what 0.14 is? It's a drop of water. I lost by a drop of water. I went from 3rd to 4th, okay? It was like, well, wait a minute. What did I learn from the first one? What did I learn from the second one? So I went to the third one, which was the week after that. And I took everything that I had failed in, and I put it into everything that I was working on towards this last one. And I finished first in big fish and second in overall weight. I ended up getting 4 checks, 2 big plaques, my picture all over, and here's what happened. Even though I didn't do well in the first tournament and I lost by 0.14 in the second tournament, right now I'm ranked 2nd in the nation. Now, I'm not saying that to brag. I'm saying it to tell you something. 3.5 years ago, I didn't have a clue what I was doing. 3.5 years ago was like, man, I hope someday I can wear a jersey that's got a bunch of sponsors on it right now. And all I've been doing for the last week is now I'm answering the phone. They're saying, hey, And now I've got sponsors coming they're coming out of the woodwork. Now I'm saying no to sponsors. It's like, no, I've got enough sponsors right now. Why am I sharing all this with you? Because I'm a flawed person. I make mistakes. I don't make good decisions. I'm flawed. I'm imperfect. I'm blemished. I'm damaged. But I've made a decision that I'm going to push myself to become something better than what my life is. Every day we have to make that decision. Will we listen to the voices that says, cheat, 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 cheat? Or we will listen to the voices that all of us have on our shoulders and inside of our head that says, do the right thing. I'm here to tell you that when you do the right thing, things don't always turn out the way you want them to turn out. I'm not going to lie to you. I did the right thing, I got disqualified. But the end result was I could look in the mirror and feel good about myself because I knew I did the right thing. You're old enough to hear this message that I'm sending to you today. You're old enough to understand that even though you screw up, even though you're flawed, even though you're damaged, even though you're imperfect, even though you've got some blemishes, you can still make the right decisions. And eventually, you will win. Eventually, you'll be on stage, on top. Eventually, you'll have people coming to you and saying, I respect you. I want to be part of your life. I want to be part of what you're doing. So now I'm stretching myself even more. Now I'm trying to put myself around harder and more experienced anglers. I'm going against people that's got 30 years of experience. I got 3. But I don't get my value from them. I've got certain people that's on the tournament trail that's like, they don't want nothing to do with me. That's fine. They don't determine my value. And I'm not afraid to fail. I'm the biggest failure in the room. I've made more mistakes than any of you have ever made in your life. More than you get. Nah, you're wrong. Nah, trust me. I got volumes and volumes of mistakes I've made. I make bad decisions all week long. I put people around me that helps me with the bad decisions that I make. And I listen to the voices that's coming to me that says, don't do this or do this. Realizing, and when I begin to identify the risk factor of what I'm going to take, is everybody with me so far? When I begin to identify the risk factor of what it's going to take, when I lose, I ask the question, can I deal with the loss? And if I can't deal with the loss, then I don't let myself go there. The Bible's very clear. It talks about how people are flawed. And in Romans chapter 8, verse 28, I want you to listen to this. He says, and we know that in all things God works out for the good for those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. Now you might say, I don't believe in God. Where was God with all this bad stuff that was going on with me? It's okay. He believes in you. But it says that when you're called according to his purpose, the Bible says that you did not call him, but he's called you. He's chosen you. Okay? He's chosen you. That means he's handpicked you. Are you flawed? Yeah. Anybody think you can become perfect when God begins to come in your life? Anybody think that God can use imperfect people? Let me ask you, can God use imperfect people? Let me give you an example of some heroes in the Bible. Are you ready? It's going to shock you. You want to know? There was a young man by the name of Joseph. God chose Joseph to save people from famine, despite the fact that Joseph came from a family that was so dysfunctional that his brothers sold him into slavery. That's how dysfunctional his family was. They sold him into slavery. God said, I can use him. God also chose Gideon. Gideon was chosen to lead this army into a battle. But he was a wimp. He was afraid all the time. You want to know how God dealt with Gideon? He had all this group of people, and God said, I want you to go and we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And he said, then I'm going to take you into battle with 300 people against thousands. Because he wanted to prove to Gideon, you are in a position where you're a fearful person. I'm going to help you with your fear. God chose Ruth to become one of Jesus' ancestors, even though Ruth was childless, she was a widow, and she was a foreigner in her country. God chose Moses, listen to this one, to become the spokesperson for the whole generation of people. Moses shouldn't have been picked to go speak about anything to anybody. You want to know why? He had a severe stuttering problem. He stuttered. He couldn't hardly talk. But God said, you're going to go talk to Pharaoh, the king, and you're going to get all the people free. And he was like, what? I can't speak. But God chose him. Chose the flawed people. How about Abraham? He was the father of faith. But Abraham had a major problem with lying. How about Noah? Anybody ever heard of Noah and the ark? He chose Noah to save his family and the world and all the animals in the world because of it. Noah was a drunk. He was drunk. After the floods disappeared, Noah went and got drunk and was found naked. That's in the Bible. How about David? King David. King David cheated on his wife. And then when he got caught cheating on his wife, he went and had the woman's husband killed. God needs imperfect people. He needs flawed people. So I sat in a room full of people that are flawed. You know what I see? I don't see a bunch of losers. I don't see a bunch of people making a bunch of bad mistakes. I don't see a bunch of people making a bunch of bad decisions. You know what I see? I see people that God can use to change the world. Because we have to go through garbage to learn certain things so we can help people that are going through garbage. Did you ever think that maybe the reason why you got addicted to drugs is because down the road, when you're sitting with someone in a counseling room, you can understand exactly what they're going through because you've overcame it? Could it be that maybe the trauma that you've been through in your life is because you're going to sit in a room somewhere down the road and you're going to help somebody? Could it be that little Bobby Denen went through everything he could be so he could stand on this stage today and tell you about the fact that you need to get your value from who you are inside and not from the outside world? Don't let your friends tell you what your value is. You need to determine what that is. Don't let the strangers out there to tell you what your value is, because your value is important. God said that He chose you and He's ordained you. That means He set you aside to do something. You might say, He hasn't chose me right now. Because He puts us in places where we can hear things like this. So it's not a mistake. Does the way everything turns out the way God wants it to turn out? No. Because there's bad people, because there's flawed people in the world. My question is, what are you going to do with it? What's the decisions that you're going to make starting right now that's going to help you become more successful? What's the decisions that you're going to make now that because you're in safe house, you're being stretched. We don't like being stretched. Or you've made some mistakes. I don't like being a failure. When will you allow the people that we've put around you to stretch you, hold you accountable? And when will you be old enough to realize? You might say, well, Pastor Bob, I've got this problem, I've got that problem, I've got this problem, the meds do this to me, this does that to me. No. Where do you get your value from? See, I see a bunch of heroes in the room. I see a bunch of overcomers in the room. I see a bunch of beautiful people in the room. I see people that can go and change the world because of what you've been through. I don't see troubled teenagers or high-risk areas. I don't even read your paperwork on why you're here, because your past doesn't determine what your future is going to be if you become a person that understands that you're valued. I value each and every one of you. I care about you more than you could ever imagine. When things begin to get shaky around here and place starts getting tore up and this person starts running away or this person starts having to get in restraints or this person's going on with that, I walk the floor at night. And I said, God, help us to let them know that we're on their side. There's not one staff member here that's not on your side. They got a job to do. And some of that job is to stretch you. Why? Because you become successful. Did I ever think that I could be ranked second in the nation? Yeah, I want to be ranked first. Do I want to get a sponsor who begins to cover all of my expenses right now? Yep. But I also know that I've got to just take it one tournament at a time. And I do this for fun. This is for fun. This is not, I won't ever make a living at it. It's for fun. In fact, what I do, if you notice, see this right here? When I'm on stage and they're interviewing me, and I'm on some of the TV shows that's going on, and this was the amazing thing, was that on the last tournament, I was catching more fish than everybody else, and they did a TV show on it, and it's going to be on the Pursuit channel in a few months, and I had a camera in the boat, and they were asking me how I'm fishing. Me, little Bob Denen. They didn't know anything about fishing 3 years ago. I got a camera in the boat with me, and I got a camera crew on another boat on the side of me, and they're turning around, and just how God, I think God blessed me, because just as they started to film me, I started catching fish left and right. Like, yeah, I just look like a pro is what I look like. Yeah, thank you, God. And I wasn't catching little ones. I was catching big ones. And so when they were done, I got to look at the camera, I got to talk to the camera, I got to tell people that's going to be seeing me on TV on how I catch it. You know what? There's going to be someone like me that was back there 3.5 years ago that's going to be watching that TV show and saying, man, I wish I could do what he does. But it was because I stretched myself and because I understand my value and I understand that I'm a flawed individual and that I don't always make the right decisions. But my bad decisions ain't going to determine who I am. They're going to teach me of where to be. So everybody close your eyes for a minute. Because I know, I can see on some of your faces, some of you have lost. You're not paying attention. Some of you are paying attention. But everybody close your eyes for a minute. Don't want you to look around. I'll wait for you all to do this for me, okay? Nobody looking around, because this probably has to do with the people next to you. I'm going to ask one simple question. I've been asking it all day. Where do you get your value from? It's an answer you got to answer inside. Who's telling you what you're worth? Is it the parent that's not there? Is it the parent that's flawed? Is it a family member that wants nothing to do with you right now? Is it a staff member that you're not getting along with? Is it your county worker? Where do you get your value from? Because I'm here to tell you that if those people that you've put around you are devaluing you, you need to get your value from someone else. And it's okay to be afraid to fail, but it's not okay to not try and learn. All right, look at me. See, I believe that when I get up and I go out in the middle of the night and I sit on my spot, and one of the things that I'm looking forward to is that when I go up on the stage and they're getting ready to interview me because I've got the best fish and I've won a few tournaments, the first thing I say is I said, first of all, I want to thank God, my family. Then I want to thank everybody that's back at Safe House. And then they'll ask me, well, what's Safe House? Safe House is something that I do more than I love fishing, and that's the fact that we've got some kids, some teenagers. They just need someone to love them, someone to believe in them, someone to direct them so they can understand. And I know that back home, I can't wait to get back home because I get to see some of the teenagers that's been put around my life. And I've had companies come up to me and say, we want to support Safe House. We want to do something for those young people back there. And so this year we're going to be doing some different trips to the lake and some different things because I've got some of these folks now that aren't worried about Bob Denen winning tournaments. They want to start giving stuff to you guys. But see, I know my value. Do you know yours? What's your value? It's up to you. I can't convince you that you're worth what I know you're worth. You have to convince yourself of it. Now I'm going to play a song. We're going to end it here. I'm going to pray in a minute. And this song talks about two words. It talks about forgiveness and it talks about grace. You are forgiven every day from the mistakes that you made. And number two, you are given grace. That's called unmerited favor. That means you don't do anything to earn anything from God. God just says, you're my child, I love you. You don't have to do anything to earn that. And a lot of times you don't have to earn it. You think you have to do this, this, and this to get value from people. No, value can't come from people. Value's got to come from you. Is this making sense? I don't care about the mistakes you made yesterday. If you want to know the truth, I don't care about the place you tore up yesterday. I wish you wouldn't. All right? Because it cost me money. But that doesn't determine. You want to know when Bob Denen says I'm done? It's when you won't let me put any more value in you. That's when we got to move on. I hate when that happens. All right? I'm going to pray. Everybody close your eyes, bow your heads. Father, I ask that you would allow us to understand our value that we have, that how you look at us, that we are special to you, that we are created completely different from anyone else. We're all individualized. And that's incredible considering all the millions of people that's lived on this earth for all of humanity. Help us understand that even though we're flawed and even though we make mistakes and we have fear that's in our life, that we can push through that if we'll just understand the greatness of who we are because of you. Everything that I've been successful with, God, you know it's because of all the failures that I've made. But most important, I'm successful because you're helping me be successful. You've taken an imperfect person that is blemished, damaged, it's flawed. And I hope that when my life is all said and done, I'll be able to look back on it and say that I represented myself and I represented you in a way that you'll be proud. I just ask that you would open our minds and our hearts to understand this as individuals that sits in this room. That this is not the beginning, this is not the end, this is just the middle, and that you're prepping us for something great if we'll just understand what our value is. So I ask this in Jesus' name. And everybody said? Amen. Amen.